Hey everyone, before we jump into this episode, just wanted to give you a little bit of context because we just jump right into this conversation. For context, in this conversation, we're talking a lot about what role we play in actively making our life more difficult, such as self-sabotage, triggering moments that make us want to shut down or make things harder on us. So in this conversation, we're really trying to get to a point of allowing ourselves to be free from our thought, or in other words, allowing ourselves to act like we're kids again and be giddy and not have any fears or cares in the world. And, we tend to carry those with us. So if you feel as though you're someone who you have a lot of baggage that you're maybe not aware of because you don't laugh the way that you used to, or you don't feel as though things feel as light as you did when you were a kid, this might be an interesting or helpful conversation for you, because ultimately what we do is we talk through how insidious anxieties can be in convincing you that that is how life should be. And we really come out on the other end realizing that it's okay to sit through difficult emotions, as they are going to be something that is genuinely just passing if we just allow it to pass by. So wanted to give you a little bit of context, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. This is Sophie here. And this is Daisy, and welcome to Life Unpotted. Thank you for joining us for our conversation. I am excited to talk today because podcasting is always so grounding for me. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way as we're going through it, because sometimes it's really, really, really hard because so many judgments and insecurities are constantly arising. And a big reflection point I've been having in life in general is the ability to continue moving forward, no matter what your thoughts are saying, no matter if you're convinced that everybody hates what you're making, or everyone's talking about you, or that you're never going to be able to make it and you're never going to be able to be successful, and that everyone around you does have it figured out. And I just see how there is a large part of my life where I would have given up and I wouldn't be where I am now. And this journey of ripping off Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid of comfort has been really, really, really challenging and extremely insightful at the same time. And I just see that sometimes it's easy to forget why we're doing something, because the mind takes over. So yeah, that's just what's on my mind right now, is kind of like just really comprehending all the changes we've made and living in a new city and 9 or so months passing. It's been about a year since we left our careers, and oscillating in between, wow, I never want to go back to that life. I never want to go back to that person who I was. And on the other side of that is, why did I make all these changes again? What's the point? And I'm honestly fascinated by how quickly my mind will flip-flop between two extremes. And then, like always, I find myself back. I resonate with what you said about when you're always going through whatever you're going through, but you remain to stay on the path. You're going to be on the same path going forward, and then all of a sudden your internal world's going to change so much that the path starts to change. And I guess what I mean by that is, we were walking on a path yesterday and we were reflecting on big changes and having a lot of clarity and having a lot of insight. And when you were going through a lot of stuff and there's like fog and there's smog and you don't know what you're doing or why you're doing it, and then one day you just start processing big chunks of your life or big things about your life. And that's like a high. In a lot of ways, that can feel like a high. And one of the things I'm realizing about that, Sophie, is that like right now, I feel like I've in the past shown up to the podcast ready to talk about things in concepts or in emotions versus just showing up as I am. And I think a lot of the times it's really difficult to show up as you are when you just aren't trying to be anything, or you're not driven by a certain emotion of excitement or passion, and you're actually just being. And it's in those moments you might think you have nothing to say because you would rather observe, or you don't have a need or a desire to express yourself, and you just are in the moment. And I guess I realize like that's probably just a story that's showing up for me right now while we're going to podcast, because saying all of that reminds me of coming back to no matter how many barricades are on the path or how many barricades you perceive to be on the path, like you just keep going down the path. You keep walking. You keep putting one foot in front of the other. You keep it so simple that you just pick up one foot and then you put down the other. You pick it up and you put it down. And what I'm seeing is by doing this in every single moment, we're going to keep on going. We're not going to get stuck somewhere. If we are just witness to every thought and emotion and experience that is constantly coming into our minds, constantly coming into our head, if we choose not to respond to those by saying, I don't have anything to say on the podcast, or I'm judging, or I'm X, Y, and Z, okay, cool, I'm observing that. But I'm just going to still show up as me. I'm not going to run away and go, start flying instead of walking on the path. Like I'm just going to keep doing what I'm meant to do, and I'm just going to observe these things that are telling me that something's wrong. So I really like this analogy of just keep on going. Like you never stop. And by this, I almost feel like the way I mean it is like in an awareness. Like keep on having that awareness of your feelings and your emotions and your thoughts, and keep on observing them. Because if you just focus on observing them, eventually they're going to shift. And that could be in a minute. That could be in 5 minutes. It could be in a day. Whereas if you get fixated on it, you're going to make it a lot more deeper than it needs to be, heavier than it needs to be, and you're not going to see reality. So, yeah, I think that it's interesting to think about how easy it is for us to just stop when things feel overwhelming and we start believing those things, or insert any emotion that you're having. Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about like anxiety and anxious feelings. And obviously anxiety is just a word that we've assigned to emotional state. And as anxiety shows up in my life, it's really this feeling of I feel paralyzed and I feel stuck and I can't see past right now. And yesterday or a few days ago, we were reflecting on, I think I was making dinner or something, and I asked you if you wanted to make a dessert because I really wanted the dessert. And I think you were like on the couch processing stuff, and you were like, I don't really want to do that right now. And I remember having a moment, or you kind of had a moment where you realized you did want to bake, and that baking was actually something you really enjoyed doing. And I was like watching this moment happen too, because I was like, wait a minute, I also feel anxious right now. I was also noticing a lot of anxiety, and living somewhere new has been really, really, really difficult for me because it's revealed to me all of my fears I've had about change and living somewhere outside my comfort zone and living somewhere away from my family and really being on my own. And I see how like there comes a point with anxiety and with these really intense emotions where if we don't question them, they will hold us back. And I bring up the example of you baking the dessert because I reflect on points in my life where I am more active. I am cooking more. I am really enjoying doing things and spending time with people, or really the way I spend time with myself shifts. The way that I go from sitting on the couch scrolling, or sitting on the couch kind of just like, I feel scared right now, I feel very small, to all of a sudden my world opens up and there's so many things I can do with my time. So I just see how like it's just so interesting how these feelings can really paralyze us, like quite literally paralyze us, that we feel, or I have felt so stalled that I forget how much I enjoy cooking. And I almost feel like sometimes like I want to stay seated when I'm feeling these intense emotions because I don't feel safe. Like I feel so scared. And fear is a really crazy thing, man, because sometimes it feels so believable that you don't know it's not real. You see it or experience it as so believable that you can't realize that it's not real. I think that is really important to say, because I think that's the thread of exactly what we're talking about, is that if you are just listening to this, you're like, oh, but I'm not anxious. It's like, you can never be so sure, because our baseline can become so normalized to any certain emotion, especially anxiety, because that's literally something that has kept us alive for millions of years. And this example that you brought up is really good. It's like, yeah, there's so many different types of experiencing anxiety through the mind, but it's all just one thing. It's all just anxiety. That's all it is. So I think when you say it like that, like, oh, it's just anxiety, it's not to undermine the experience. The experience is real, but in some ways it's to limit the story. It's not unique. It is the pulse in our veins that has kept us alive from getting eaten, getting killed. So of course I'm going to believe my anxiety when it says, don't go and make X, Y, and Z dessert. Dottie eats desserts. Because you should just stay here frozen and just stay here on the couch. Whereas if I'm able to observe that these thoughts are happening, it's telling me to just stay here. I know better than that because this has happened so many times. It's what stopped me from enjoying life. Because actually going against what that anxiety is telling you not to do, doing it and facing it, it usually pops it, or you get immersed into something else that you just move on. And we were talking about this yesterday too, and really acknowledging how my adult life has been plagued, or there has been an undercurse of anxiety that's prevented me from really enjoying every moment. And the really cool thing about acknowledging that is that you can be aware of the insidiousness, the insidious nature of anxiety's will to convince you that it's for a specific fixed reason, that it is just anxiety itself in those moments that you feel as though you have to listen to it. And I guess I say that because it can take over your full life if you don't just start facing these things. It's like you're sitting here and you don't want to do this. Well, those things start to pile up. They start to pile up and they pile up and they pile up. And before you know it, you're just plagued by anxiety or XYZ emotion. But I think it's been hard for me to recognize like truly how anxious I've been, because it's like you don't want to admit that. But when you're able to realize that it's not unique to you, it's a fact of our living reality of people are anxious. We're anxious. We're anxious all the time. You drive in traffic and people jerk left and right and they honk and they almost hit you. And no one wants to admit that that's anxiety. But when you can call it what it is, you know when it's coming around and you know what to look for. And you can just recognize it, isolate it for what it is. And from there, it's not you. It's just visiting you. And the more you recognize that it's just visiting you, the less likely you are to keep it around. And I think that sounds simple, but it took a while for me to understand that. And I'm sure I'll forget that and come back to it. 2 thoughts I'm having. Number 1, I'm just reflecting on the importance of pushing through and going towards what you're scared of. There is such value in going towards the fear, in going towards the anxiety and saying, okay, from the smallest example, there's been times where I don't want to get off my phone. It's like 7 p.m., I'm sitting on the couch, and I quite literally, I'm just like, I don't want to get off. And what I've done is really, okay, I see that belief come up, so I want to challenge it. And I want to find out, where will I be in 5 minutes from now? Really, like, where will I end up if I do the opposite of what my anxiety is telling me? So, like the other night, I had to go to CVS. It was like 9 p.m. and I just didn't really want to go. I was just like, I don't really want to leave the house. But I ended up going, and there was an insight in that of, why do I become so rigid? Why did I become so rigid in those years post-college graduation, into law school, into the working world? And kind of starting to ask the question to myself of when did this rigidity begin? Because I look so clearly back to videos of me as a child and photos of me as a child, and I'm playing sports. I'm so active. I'm spending so much time outside. I'm having such a vibrant life. And obviously, I went through a lot of stuff the past few years. So it's easy for my mind to want to attribute it to that. And yes, going through all that pain and going through that intense experience, I was in fight or flight. It did send me into fight or flight because I was going through so much pain that I didn't know how to face. But I look back to even college, and mostly when I graduated law school and I started working, I got so serious. I got so tense. I got so rigid. Like, you wouldn't just catch me like dancing in my kitchen playing music. And I don't know, I'm just really reflecting on that as I have been re-observing those patterns come up of looking at myself and being like, hey, you are the only one right now limiting yourself. You are the only one right now getting in the way of yourself. You are the only one quite literally obstructing your life. Why are you so forgetful? Or why are you choosing to believe that you can't enjoy life? I almost feel like I've become scared to have fun because the anxiety took over.
Well, I think there's different layers of anxiety. There's the obvious one. Your heart's beating. Well, there's the other one. You just asked me off the cuff, do I sound bad? I'm judging myself. That's anxiety. That's you believing some sort of judgment that is only perceived in your perspective right now. It's not in reality. It's not necessarily in the reality of the person who's listening right now. There's two realities. There is the reality of the sound of this podcast coming out of headphones or a speaker and it just playing. And then there's the reality of your mind, Sophie, and how you might be perceiving that. And you're adding on all these additional critiques and pieces, like you're editing your college thesis paper. There's red marks here, there's red marks there. When in reality, when you look at it at real freaking reality, there's no red marks. It just is. And I think that was a really good example because when you go into the working world and it is anxiety, a lot of the times there's a lot of adjustments and all of this stuff that's happening that there's so much stuff that it's hard to really sort through it and see what's real and what's not. And this is all the time also. But it's that exactly. It's challenging it. We both, we're 20 minutes into this podcast. We've both been in our heads for the first 20 minutes. Like that just shifted for me because I just recognized like that's how insidious anxiety can be, is that you aren't even fully showing up to record this right now. You're not fully showing up. Why? Because you're in your head. Well, why are you in your head? I don't know, but you are. It's just that. You're just in your head. And when you call it out, you recognize it. You recognize what it is. Because that's how often in our day-to-day lives, we oscillate between being here in reality and being caught up in our head. And that's what we're illustrating here. And on a deep level, when we are going throughout our day, there's probably so many subconscious judgments that run us. And the most freeing thing we can do is we can recognize them. Because we think of, the classic, you're like, oh, I just drove 5 minutes and I don't remember those 5 minutes of driving. How many times has that happened to you, like on a regular drive from work or to school or to wherever you're going that you do every day? Like that's like a small form of disassociation. And like the amount of times like we can disassociate throughout the day. There's so many different types of it. There's different extremes of it. But on a day-to-day basis, it's considered to be dissociative if you're watching TV because you're immersed in a different reality. And that's really what it is. Like, you're split from your reality. And again, I'm not like a psychologist. I'm just speaking about this from like my experience and like what I've Googled and stuff. So it's like not like clinical or psychological advice, but more so it's looking at our lives just on a day-to-day basis of like looking at how our brains work and like my experience with that and how it gets in the way and how it's so easy to have cognitive dissonance, to be like, oh, I want to be engaged in this conversation, but why can't I be? Why am I in my head? Why am I caught up in my head? Well, just the fact that you're caught up in your head and you're thinking about how you're caught up in your head. Like, we have the option when we become aware of something that's going on is that we can stay in it and think that we're stuck in it, or we can actually challenge it and realize that we can pull ourselves out of it. And by pull ourselves out of it, I mean we can just snap our fingers again. And when I say that, like, it's not undermining the whole experience of your mind and your emotions and all of these things. It feels like on a day-to-day basis when we're interacting, like, think of, like, I feel like for so long in my life, like, there would be times where I'd walk into an environment and I would feel my mind go blank. I would feel foggy and not clear-headed. It'd be hard to connect with people. Networking events, a good example. Like, that's anxiety. What I'm trying to get across is just that you might not realize that you're anxious. I'm not trying to say you need to know you're anxious. It's like when you're able to recognize it, it doesn't have to control you and you can face it.
It's interesting, this process of coming out of your head, because sometimes it's like a bodily feeling of I'm kind of contracting myself right now and I'm not fully trying, I guess, but I don't even like the word trying because I feel like I have so much anger towards that word from like work. And yeah, I guess it's interesting to think about it with the podcast. Like, sometimes I feel like I oscillate between I don't want to act like I know anything versus can I just show up? Can I just talk? Can I just express what's on my mind? And I just see how that's hard for me sometimes to do, or has been hard for me to do, or really it reveals to me that I'm in my head because I'm thinking so much. Is this good? Is this making sense? Why am I even doing this podcast? And those are not even thoughts that actually physically come up. They're like, then what are they? It's more so what prevents me from being more engaged. And sometimes it's the passing of time. Sometimes it's like, I couldn't get to this point until I did. That's the benefit of pushing through. And like, there was times when we first started, I was like, should we restart this? I was thinking like, should I restart it? Like, my intro wasn't good. And that's the point of all this, is to realize there's no such thing as perfection and there's no such thing as being perfect. And if you're being true to yourself and expressing yourself and showing up authentically, then that's enough. But I just feel like I see how much pressure I have put in myself historically with creating and work. And that goes hand in hand with anxiety of I'm like so scared of somebody listening to this and being like, I fucking hate this. And it's so interesting because, again, like when you dig deeper into that and you go and you're like, okay, so why do you care? Why do you care, Sophie? And it's almost like I don't even know why I'm so invested in that belief. I don't even know why I care so much. Maybe because the podcast has been connected to leaving our jobs and we're trying to build a community and building a brand. And historically, the monetization component of when you're doing something creative and you're also trying to make money, that pressure of that has been involved. And I'm like judging myself for even saying this right now. I don't even know why I'm judging it.
Simply because you're in a judging state. You're choosing to hate yourself. You're choosing to self-sabotage. You're choosing to work against yourself. There's a world in which you had all these thoughts and you just saw them and you didn't respond to them. In a lot of ways, you've been responding to your thoughts this whole podcast.
But have I been? Because I've been pushing through either way and I haven't really brought them up. I only brought them up because you asked. You kind of seemed like you posed the question of, are you anxious right now? So I feel like I started to put attention onto it after that, which is why I was discussing it. But from the beginning, I was like Don't believe that, keep going. Don't believe that, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that when you're observing thoughts and you're just not letting them appear on your face, or especially in your words, like you're kind of having a poker face in a lot of ways, it can feel like you're walking through mud. It can feel like you're walking through mud. So internally, it can feel that way when you are observing that, but you're not necessarily letting it look like you're walking through mud. Does that make sense? The difference there?
I guess, but I guess I'm just wondering why, like, my default mechanism is self-sabotage, like, is like, I just want to end the episode right now. And I definitely think as a kid, I had that all or nothing thinking, kind of as a teenager, and being like, getting mad and just being like, I hate all of this. I don't want any of this. I'm not eating dinner tonight. Like, I remember there being times where it's like, one little thing didn't go my way and I ruined the whole night. You can find those patterns come up in your life later on of this, like, oh, I'm so frustrated right now that I'm willing to throw my computer and just say, fuck it. And sometimes the path of saying fuck it is really, really enticing. It's like staring at you and it's like, just do it, just do it, just do it. And it feels like there were so many times in my life where, like, I would follow the anger and I would follow the pain and I would follow the freak out. Almost like I want to make this worse for myself, which makes no sense that I would want to do that to myself, which just kind of shows to me how easily I oscillate between a state of love for myself and a state of hate towards myself. It feels like my engagement in the working world, or really in the world since I graduated college, when I'm striving so intensely for something, I almost don't know the difference of working hard without being mad at myself. And I think about, like, the way I used to work out and, like, being around coaches too for sports practices, and it's like, give me 100 sprints, like, do this. And I'm like, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. Like, pushing myself. I feel like I've pushed myself so much in my life to get good grades and to become a lawyer and to excel and to make money on my own and to get through things. I'm going to get through everything. That a lot of that was rooted out of anger. And I'm like, why would it be out of anger? Why am I angry at myself? It doesn't really add up anymore, but I guess at some point it did. So I guess at some point when I was a teenager and I ripped apart my entire closet and I threw my clothes on the floor and I told my little sister to clean it up, and she still brings this example up till this day, like, absolutely zero accountability for my emotions. But of course, I'm a teenager. And I guess I just see, like, first of all, if I was to be like, let's restart this, I'm not considering you because you've already invested your time and energy into recording this. I'm also not considering myself. It's so confusing to realize that there's parts of me that are angry and there's parts of me that want to sabotage. Because when I'm in these blissful, peaceful states of love, I'm like, why would you do that to yourself?
But they're not separate. Like, it's always all there. Like, you always have the option. Like, you oscillate quickly because it's not like you just get to a state where you're just in love or a state where you're just in anger. It's like it's the ability to handle any emotion that comes up. Like, think of, you had this experience, and we both had this experience with the first podcast episode we recorded. And we were just like, fuck it. We're not going to do it anymore. And sure, there's been several podcasts where, like this, who knows how it turns out? I don't know. Maybe it'll be good. Maybe it'll be helpful. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will. But think about in between that, how many really great pieces of content we've put out. And I think it's in those moments, like, you're having the expectation that you need to be perfect in this moment. And it's like, you think you have to get, like, your love from being perfect in this moment. And you're making it life so much more difficult on yourself by putting so much pressure on yourself. And, like, I know firsthand, I've put so much pressure on myself my entire life. But it's like, the funny thing is, like, you're choosing to do it because you're saying, I can't handle this. But it's like, you can weather any storm. You just tell yourself that you can't. So you have to hurt everyone around you because you can't weather yourself through the difficult emotions. When in reality, it's only as deep as you allow yourself to make it. It doesn't have to be deep at all, and you can drag yourself through the mud and you can make it harder on yourself. But you also just don't have to do that. I think there comes a time where you drag yourself through the mud, or you scream at the top of your lungs, or you scare yourself with the rage you carry inside, that it comes to a point where you're like, I'm making that worse because I'm not allowing myself to just sit through it. Because if you just sit through it, it's going to pass. Like how we started this convo. With any really intense emotion, especially for both of us, that comes up around productivity and both the pressure we put on ourselves and the experiences we've had with that. It's almost like in those moments, the intensity of you're a loser because you're not creating a really great podcast right now. It's like you really are believing that. You're really believing that. And you're reacting as if your life's going to cease after this is over. When in reality, you're gonna get off the podcast and you're gonna look outside and there's the birds just on cue. You're gonna hear the birds. Like it's this fictitious reality that you're creating in your head that's just not real. It's just not real. Because when we're able to sit through the emotion that might last, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, yeah, that's real. But if you just sit through it and you just experience it, a minute goes by, few minutes goes by, you go for a walk around the block, and you come out seeing the vibrancy of the colors. Your tunnel vision goes away, and you're not going to be so hard on yourself. Because if you're being so hard on yourself, you have to realize your active commitment to doing it. You are actively committing to be hard on yourself. And it sucks to hear that. Today, I was dropping Sophie off at a coffee shop before I went to therapy. And I had to really analyze why I had such an extreme anxiety of being late to therapy. Because I screamed in the car because I was like, the traffic is insane. This guy told me I can't stop here. And I shrilled. I screamed so loud. And it startled me. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. My body calmed down because I was like, what are you doing? Like, you're literally going to therapy, a place to talk about your emotions. If you're 5 minutes late, like, who gives a fuck? Why are you saying that you're going to like be worth shit if you are late? What is this pressure you're putting on yourself? And I looked at pressure in the eye and I startled myself with that scream. I did. I really did. And I realized that I was actively the one that was causing all of the misery, all of the shame, all of this shit. And I realized it. And then I was like, I don't want to do that to myself. I don't want to put myself through that. This is all self-created, all self-created. And if it hurts to hear that, it's because you're resisting taking accountability in the matter of the fact of how you're making yourself feel. Because as soon as you can just feel the quick stab to the ego, stab to any part of your body, and you accept it, it's like, okay, the emotion has moved. It's moved through my system, and I'm back here in this reality. And I'm not going to let that impact my relationships, my connections, my peace, my experience. I'm not going to let that impact my ability to walk through the world as I would like to walk through it. So when we have the awareness of how we're feeling, like we have the option to just sit with it and feel like we're walking through mud, have compassion, or we can put up a huge wall and we can paint our entire world with that feeling, paint our entire reality with that feeling, and make it feel like the walls are closing in. And the more we do that, the harder it is to just feel the feeling.
I've been there screaming in the car. Like, I think that happened to me a few months ago. I just like screamed so loud. It was after, we recorded that day. It was after my doctor I went to, they didn't take my insurance. And I was just like, I have to release right now. And, you know, sometimes you do those things and you are like, what the fuck? I have the capacity for that much anger and that much rage. And what I've learned is that, like, yeah, like you said, like the anger is always on the table. The anger is always there. It's like a wheel of like every emotion. Okay, what do you want to pick today? At the casino, I'm gambling. Pull the draw down. Okay, what am I going to get today? But I think you learn to just stop pulling it down and to stop going towards it. And I guess I'm just really amazed at how sneaky it is, because sometimes I'm like, oh, I know I'm not caught up. But it's like, when you're thinking you're not caught up, does that mean you're probably caught up?
Yeah, you can never be so sure. You can never be sure, ever. Because it's the example I feel like I used to always give in podcasts of like, it's a wolf dressed in sheep's clothing. As soon as you're willing to settle on something and decide that, yeah, everything's good, that sheep's going to come walking out, smile at you, make you a warm cookie, give you a glass of milk, then it's going to reveal that it's a wolf.
You know you're in a state of judgment when now my thought is like, I'm mad I got caught up in my head. Like all of a sudden I'm analyzing it even further.
Okay, but that's the point. It's like you go from being on top of the world to being in your head. Like this happens when you choose to truly be aware of it, which allows you to truly be free. It's like you oscillate between it. It's why you have to have the capacity to allow yourself to have the capacity to feel it, because like this is a literal exercise. This experience of what we're doing right now on this podcast, it is an experience of sitting through extreme triggers and discomfort and just letting them be what they are. Don't let it change anything about you. Don't let it change your state. Just observe it. And you know what? The funny thing is you can really be like, oh, I'm observing it. And it can grow and you can make it more challenging. You know what I mean? Like it's so insidious. It's so sneaky. And I mean, I'm watching you do it, you know, like you might think that you're sitting through it and like you are, you know, well enough, but it's like, you know, I see it. But that's also the point, because the point is that these things make you stronger when you're able to sit through big emotions, because it just informs your ability to have more awareness and have more internal strength, because it doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be deep. It just, you know, you have to do it, because if not, it's going to taint your world. It's going to color your world. And really it's up to you. And if you want to be so angry that like you're punching a wall, been there, that you have to realize like you're choosing to do that in every moment, every single moment. It's like you can just walk away. That's why I feel like so many people have the advice of count to 10, go on a walk. Because a lot of the times it's like, it's just the fixation. It's just the stuckness. Like Sophie, like at the height of what you were dealing with, the anger, the judgment, whatever. I swear, if you just went on a walk on the block, you would come back. You just would it helps you get unstuck. So I think it's really important to be reminded that nothing is that serious or that deep that it should take away your peace, especially when it's a figment of our imagination that taints our reality, because it just doesn't have to be that way. It's like in any instance, it's almost like, what would a walk do for me? Just asking yourself that. Getting up, moving, getting out of the experience that you're in, because what you are in is an experience that you've just created for yourself, and you can leave at any time. You can leave whenever. You can check out at any time, and you can cancel the registration. You can cancel everything. You can just throw it away at any time, but you have to make the decision to do so.
The door is always open, but you have to allow yourself to walk towards the door. And I think a lot of the times we're so scared that the state is going to continue that we don't walk. We don't want to walk. We don't want to go forward. But that's the point of doing this podcast, is to 46 minutes in is to learn about yourself and to learn the beliefs that keep you stuck and keep you from fully tapping into your potential. And we're always just oscillating. We're always just flowing. And I think the key is to let it all happen moment to moment and move forward with the day. You never have to take what happened in the morning with you to the evening. It's always an option to walk through the door into the next moment. So yeah, I feel like I've definitely learned from this episode, which has been cool to experience, because why would I think that I have nothing to learn? Why would I settle on the idea that I'm not in my head and I'll never be again? Maybe if I just accept that I'm going to oscillate, I won't be as, again, I'm just trying to control the situation. I'll never have control.
And on the other end, it can be like, oh, I'm aware of this feeling and I'm feeling it. Okay. And it can get serious. And it's like, I think for me, the barometer, it's like, okay, can I laugh about this now? Can we share a laugh about it? Can we, clear the air? Can we clear the energy? Just because we didn't say extreme hurtful things doesn't mean that like intense energy wasn't pulsated out and experienced, So it's like, can you actually do like a full body release of what you're feeling and like be like, all right, it's not that serious, and just like walk away and like let go of it. It's truly, there's a point where it's like you just have to let go.
Michael Singer, whatever you do, stay open. So on that note, I'm going to go for a walk before community Zoom, but I am seeing the lightness in all this, and I really do feel like I'm able to laugh at it and able to, I don't know, just a reflection of how helpful it is for me to express myself and to talk through things. So thank you, Daisy, for having this conversation with me, and thank you for sharing words that helped me recognize maybe what I was doing to myself when I didn't even realize it. And hopefully to the listener, this conversation was whatever it needed to be for you, because I'm not going to put pressure on myself. That has to be perfect.
Well, clearly you walked into this conversation with some ideas that were in the subconscious of being hard on yourself. And that's clearly what it is. It's like you don't have to be hard on yourself. So it's always funny to end these episodes because it's like, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed. But I mean, these are real conversations, and it's like, this is why we don't want to check in on ourselves, because we don't want to deal with this, because we're like, oh, we want to put it off, put the emotions off. But it's like, sure, check in with yourself, take an hour to do so, and then don't ever succumb to the emotions, because there could be, at the end of it all, there could be a laugh, a true connection, a moment of prize or something to cherish. There's just, you never know. So it's like never get off the train, because if you get off prematurely, it's not going to complete. And when it completes, you're going to feel actually free. If you get off before you feel free, you're going to get trapped. So those are my thoughts for today. And I'm going to let Sophie go on her walk. So thanks for listening, everyone. And we will see you next week.